Let's talk about automatic parts washing cabinets and immersion heaters, and properly troubleshooting whether or not an immersion heater is functioning and working, so that we know whether or not it has to be replaced. Because a lot of times, because it's an immersion heater, you can't really tell whether or not it's working. It may be shorted out inside the cabinet under the water level. So the way we do that is we just go ahead and we isolate the circuit where the heating elements are at, and in this case basically we just have two contactors. We have the one that's the motor contactor. We know that it's a motor contactor because it has a contactor and it has an overload protector. So this runs actually the cabinet washer with the pump, and then right next to it is a set of contacts. So we're basically just going to take our voltage reading. Sorry about the camera here, getting my wires ready. Okay, if you're not totally dizzy by now. Then we come back and we just go ahead and we measure across the contacts. You can either measure at the top, and the easiest way to do it, where I start normally, is at the top. And typically what I'll do is I'll go ahead and measure for voltage just to make sure that I am getting voltage. If I am, I always want to make sure that the fuses are also good. So what I'll do is I'll just follow my wiring back, and as I follow these wires back, I find out that these three wires right here are the ones that provide power to the heater immersion element. You have three on the left, and then you have three on the right. These three right here are the ones that run the heating element. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've shut down the safety disconnect to make sure that there's no power in the cabinet. We pull out these fuses individually, one by one. We use our electrical meter. We set it for continuity, and we check to see if we have continuity through the fuses to make sure fuses are good. As long as the fuses are good, then we know that that part's good. Then we go ahead, we come to the top of the contactor, we measure voltage there. We go to the front of the machine, and we make sure that our heater indicator, in this case it's a toggle switch, it could also be a spring rewound rotary switch, is in the on position. So we want to make sure that we are actually calling for heat on the immersion heater. So that's turned on right there. That will engage this contactor that we were just measuring at the top. We measure our voltage at the top. We also measure our voltage at the bottom. In measuring our voltage, we can measure across the two legs, or we can measure from one leg over to the ground. We just have to find the ground lug, the ground terminal within the cabinet. And basically the easiest way to do that is to be able to find the green on the terminal strip and find out where those wires all end up landing. And in this case, they all come up here to our incoming power supply from the box. You can measure from ground to each one of these legs individually at the bottom of the contactor once it's engaged, and make sure that each of these legs, in this case this is a three-phase heating element, it could be a single phase on different machines where you'd only have two legs. This one has three because it's three-phase. So we measure each of these individually to ground. As long as we have voltage, then we can go ahead and we can take our amp meter and set it for measuring amperage and voltage. Once we do that, then we can go ahead and clip it on to the wire, and we measure to see whether or not there's being amperage, which is a measure of power that's being used. If each of these legs has got amperage being used on it, then we know the heating element is working correctly because it's using electricity, it's generating heat, and we record that information on our routine scheduled maintenance or on the repair ticket. So we have several different measurements that we're taking. We're taking line voltage, we're taking load voltage, we're double checking to make sure the fuses are all good individually by pulling them out, checking continuity, always making sure safety first, that your safety disconnect is shut off so there's no power in the cabinet. Whenever you have your fingers moving around here, you always want to make sure that there's no power. Check the fuses, reinstall them, check your voltage at the top and at the bottom once the contactor's engaged, and then do your amperage check. Record your amperage readings, and that'll verify whether or not your heating element is working. Now, if your contactor is engaged and you have voltage here but you have no amperage, that's an indication that your element is bad and it has to be replaced. Then you can go down to where the heating element is at, and in this case it's behind that square cover right there. It's held in place by 4 screws. Take those sheet metal screws off, record all the information on the exterior of the heating element so that we get the right size. Either that, take a video, take a picture of it so that your supervisor can get the right one. Make, model, and serial number are also important to record on the paperwork. You can find that, for example, on this type of unit right here, right there. We record all of our make, model, and serial number information so we get the right component. Then we can replace the heating element, making sure that the cabinet's clean, that there's no mud inside, and then we can go ahead and continue and do our voltage and amperage checks. If you have any questions, check with your supervisor or call us at or you can visit us on the web at www.aefresno.com.